What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this, there are 80,000 people who cannot go home? Not because of a natural disaster, not because of a civil war, but because of a diplomatic agreement that the President of the United States personally brokered, and that appears to be quietly, dangerously unraveling. Last year, President Donald Trump stood before cameras and said, and I'm quoting, "Who else could say, I'm going to make a phone call and stop a war between two very powerful countries?" He was talking about Thailand and Cambodia. He brokered a ceasefire. He took the credit. The media moved on. But today, the Prime Minister of Cambodia sat down with Fox News and told a very different story, a story of barbed wire, shipping containers, sealed villages, occupied territory, and a ceasefire that exists on paper, but not on the ground. Welcome to Senate Decoded. I'm going to give you the full picture, the history, the players, the geopolitics, the China angle, and exactly what's at stake for America. Buckle up. This one matters. Let's start with what's actually happening on the ground right now. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet, son of the legendary strongman Hun Sen, traveled to Washington this week for the very first meeting of Trump's so-called Board of Peace. And while he was there, he sat down with Fox News and said something that should have been front-page news everywhere. He said that Thai military forces have moved beyond even Thailand's own disputed territorial claims. Read that again. Not just into contested land, beyond the contested land, into territory that even Thailand doesn't formally claim. And what are those Thai soldiers doing there? They've sealed off Cambodian villages with barbed wire and shipping containers. 80,000 Cambodian civilians cannot return to their homes. Not 80, not 800, 80,000 people. Now let's be precise here, because precision matters in geopolitics. Prime Minister Manet's exact words were, "The occupation is beyond even Thailand's unilateral claim. Many of the villagers cannot go back to their hometowns." This is not a minor border skirmish. This is a sitting prime minister in Washington directly telling the United States that the peace deal the American president personally championed is being violated. And yet, here's where it gets more complicated, Manet is not threatening war. He's not rattling sabers. He explicitly said, and I quote, "Our position is to always stick to peaceful resolutions. We don't believe that using war to stop a war is sustainable or practical. That's not weakness. That's calculation. Because here's the brutal math. Thailand has a population of over 70 million people. Cambodia has 17 million. Thailand's military is significantly larger, better equipped, and better funded. Any military escalation doesn't end well for Cambodia. So Manet is doing what small nations have done throughout history when they're outgunned. He's playing the diplomatic long game. He came to Washington. He spoke to the media. He praised the Board of Peace. He's making noise in the halls of power, hoping the Americans will pressure Thailand to back down. The question is, will they? To understand why this border is disputed in the first place, we need to go back, way back, to the era of French colonialism. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, France controlled what they called Indochina, modern-day Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. When France drew the borders of these territories, they used maps and surveys that were often imprecise, incomplete, or simply wrong. When those countries gained independence, Cambodia in 1953, they inherited borders that were ambiguous, borders that both sides interpreted differently, borders that were drawn not by the people who lived there, but by a colonial power that was more interested in administrative convenience than geographic accuracy. The result? A 500-mile land border between Thailand and Cambodia that has never been fully mutually agreed upon. And nowhere has this tension been more explosive than around the ancient Khmer temple sites, particularly the UNESCO World Heritage Site of Preah Vihear. Now, here's something that most Western audiences don't fully appreciate. For Cambodians, these temples are not just tourist attractions. They are sacred sites. They are proof, carved in stone, of the historical greatness of the Khmer civilization that built Angkor Wat, that dominated Southeast Asia for centuries. These temples are national identity. So when fighting breaks out near Preah Vihear, as it has repeatedly, it's not just a military dispute. It's an existential cultural one. The International Court of Justice actually ruled back in 1962 that Preah Vihear belonged to Cambodia. Thailand accepted the ruling, grudgingly, but disputes about the surrounding territory have continued for decades. Fast forward to last year, fighting breaks out again. People are being displaced. Buildings are being damaged. There are reports, confirmed by journalists and local sources, of cluster munitions and unexploded ordnance around the Preah Vihear Temple complex, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a place that belongs not just to Cambodia, but to all of humanity. Cambodian officials say Thai forces deliberately targeted the area. Thai officials say they only engaged in contested security zones and didn't deliberately target cultural landmarks. Both sides are saying what they're supposed to say. The truth, as always, is somewhere in the smoke. What we know for certain is this: the fighting was real, the displacement was real, the damage was real, and that's what brought America in. Let's talk about how Trump inserted himself into this conflict, because this is where things get politically interesting. The ceasefire was brokered during an ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, is the regional bloc that includes Thailand, Cambodia, and 8 other countries. It's not NATO, it doesn't have a military enforcement mechanism, but it provides a diplomatic forum, and that forum became the stage for American involvement. Trump, or more accurately, Trump's diplomatic team, facilitated conversations that led to a ceasefire agreement between Bangkok and Phnom Penh. And Trump did what Trump does. He claimed the credit, publicly, enthusiastically. Who else could say, I'm going to make a phone call and stop a war between 2 very powerful countries, Thailand and Cambodia? Now, look, there's nothing wrong with taking credit for diplomatic success. Every president does it. And from a pure political standpoint, brokering any kind of peace deal is a genuine achievement, even if the details are messy. But here's the problem with claiming enormous personal credit for a fragile diplomatic arrangement. When that arrangement starts to fracture, the political downside is equally enormous, which brings us to Trump's Board of Peace, a new diplomatic initiative that held its inaugural meeting this week. Prime Minister Monet attended. He was asked to praise it. He did praise it. The Board of Peace can play an active role in promoting peace, stability, and normalcy between Cambodia and Thailand, Monet said. But read the subtext. A foreign head of state flew to Washington specifically to tell American media that Thai soldiers are still in Cambodian territory. He's not just praising the Board of Peace, he's activating it. He's putting his chips on American diplomatic leverage to solve a problem that American diplomatic leverage helped create. And that's a significant bet, because right now, Washington's attention is being pulled in 1,000 directions. Ukraine, the Middle East, China, the economy, domestic politics. Whether the Board of Peace has the bandwidth, the will, and the leverage to actually enforce the ceasefire it helped broker, that remains to be seen. What's clear is that Cambodia is watching, and so is the rest of Southeast Asia. Now, here's where this story gets truly geopolitically explosive. We've been talking about a border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia. That's the surface level. But underneath the ceasefire and the displaced civilians and the damaged temples, there is a much larger story playing out. And that story involves China. Ream Naval Base. Remember that name? Ream Naval Base is located on Cambodia's southern coast on the Gulf of Thailand. It sits at a strategically significant position, a position that, from a naval planning perspective, offers proximity to critical shipping lanes in the South China Sea. Over the past several years, China has poured money into Ream. They funded a major renovation. They provided technical support. They sent personnel. And for years, U.S. officials have been raising alarm bells, arguing that Cambodia had quietly granted China exclusive, or near exclusive, access to the base. If that's true, if China effectively controls a naval base in the Gulf of Thailand, that's a massive strategic development. It would mean China has a military foothold in mainland Southeast Asia, adjacent to key waterways, in a location that could be used to project force or to monitor American naval movements in the region. The implications are enormous. So here's what happened in late January that nobody is really talking about. The USS Cincinnati, an American naval vessel, docked at Ream Naval Base, the first American warship to do so since the base was renovated with Chinese funding. And when it pulled into port, it docked approximately 150 meters away from a Chinese naval vessel that was already moored there. 150 meters, the length of a football field and a half, more or less. An American warship and a Chinese warship docked at the same Cambodian base at the same time. That is an image that geopolitical strategists will be studying and debating for years. Now, Prime Minister Monet was asked about this directly. He pushed back hard on the idea that China controls the base. Our Constitution says that no foreign military base can be situated on Cambodian soil, he said, and he used the USS Cincinnati visit as Exhibit A for his argument. It clearly shows that Cambodia is not exclusively used as a naval base for cooperation with China. That's a technically accurate statement. The United States did dock a warship there. Cambodia does maintain legal sovereignty. But here's the counter-argument that U.S. defense analysts will make. Legal sovereignty and operational influence are not the same thing. The question isn't whether Cambodia's constitution forbids foreign bases. The question is who actually controls the operational tempo, the logistics, the access, the intelligence. And that question does not have a clean, simple answer. Here's the bigger picture you need to understand. China has been methodically, patiently, strategically building influence across Southeast Asia for decades. Economic investment, infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative, debt diplomacy, cultural soft power, and increasingly, military access. Ream Naval Base is potentially one piece of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that, if completed, would give China dominant military influence in a region that has historically been outside its direct sphere of control. And Cambodia, small, economically dependent, sandwiched between more powerful neighbors, is trying to navigate that reality without getting crushed. Manet said it himself. Navigating ties with competing world powers doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, and that Cambodia, as a smaller nation, cannot afford to choose one country against the other. That's diplomatic code for we're not going to pick a side because we can't afford to lose either one. It's a reasonable position for a small nation, but it creates real complications for Washington, which would very much prefer Cambodia to pick a side. Let's talk about the man at the center of all this, because understanding Prime Minister Hun Manet is essential to understanding Cambodia's moves. Hun Manet took office in 2023, succeeding his father, Hun Sen. His father ruled Cambodia for nearly 4 decades, one of the longest-serving leaders in the world. Under Hun Sen, Cambodia was nominally a democracy, but in practice, the ruling Cambodian People's Party maintained iron control. Opposition figures were jailed, exiled, or sidelined. Press freedom was curtailed. Human rights organizations consistently flagged serious concerns. Hun Manet's elevation to power in 2023 was, on its surface, a historic moment. The first formal transfer of power in decades, a new generation taking the helm. But critics pointed out fairly that this wasn't really a democratic transition. It was a dynastic one. The same party, the same power structure, just with a younger face. Here's what makes Hun Manet genuinely interesting, though, and this is something that gets almost no coverage in Western media. He's a West Point graduate, the United States Military Academy at West Point. He earned a degree there. He then went on to pursue a PhD in economics. He's not just a political heir, he's a sophisticated, internationally educated leader who understands Western institutions, Western thinking, and Western leverage. And that creates a fascinating dynamic. Here's a leader who was trained by the U.S. military, who understands American power, who is trying to court Washington while simultaneously maintaining deep economic and strategic ties with Beijing. He resumed joint military exercises with the United States, the Angkor Sentinel exercises, which had been suspended since 2017. He's cooperating with the FBI on online scam operations. He's welcoming American warships. At the same time, he's accepting Chinese naval presence at Reem. He's not breaking with Beijing. He can't afford to. This is the tightrope that Hun Manet walks every single day. And his trip to Washington, his decision to go to the Board of Peace, to speak to Fox News, to make the case for American intervention is a deliberate strategic move. He is betting that Washington's desire to counter China in Southeast Asia will motivate the United States to pressure Thailand. He is using America's geopolitical interests as leverage. It's a sophisticated gambit. Whether it works depends entirely on whether the Trump administration decides Cambodia is worth the political capital it would take to push back on Thailand, a country that is also technically a U.S. treaty ally. Before we get to the final analysis, there's one more dimension of this Cambodia story that I have to cover because it directly affects American citizens and American money. Pig butchering scams. If you haven't heard that phrase before, you need to right now. Pig butchering is a type of fraud scheme. The name comes from the Chinese phrase for fattening a pig before slaughter. Here's how it works. Scammers contact victims, usually via social media or dating apps, and slowly, patiently build trust over weeks or months. They'll pretend to be romantic partners, friends, or successful investors. Then, once they've fattened the victim with emotional connection and small early investment wins, they persuade them to invest large sums of money into fake cryptocurrency platforms. When the victim tries to withdraw their money, they discover the platform is fraudulent. Their savings are gone. These operations have defrauded victims worldwide, including tens of thousands of Americans, out of billions of dollars. And Cambodia has become a significant hub for these operations. Large compounds, often staffed by trafficked workers who are themselves victims, people brought in under false pretenses and forced to run scams under threat of violence. The United States has been pressing Cambodia to crack down. U.S. authorities have sanctioned Cambodian-linked entities tied to crypto fraud, and to his credit, Hun Manet says his government is taking action. He told Fox News that Cambodia recently worked with the FBI to dismantle a major operation, arresting a high-profile Cambodian figure and shutting down one of the major compounds. This cooperation matters. It's one of the concrete ways in which Cambodia has been demonstrating value to Washington, showing that the relationship is a two-way street, not just a series of requests for American help. But let's be honest about the scale of the problem. Individual arrests, while meaningful, are not the same as systemic dismantlement. The scam ecosystem in Cambodia, and in neighboring Myanmar and Laos, is deeply embedded, connected to powerful interests, and extraordinarily profitable. Real progress will require sustained, systemic cooperation over years, not a single headline arrest. Watch this space. All right, let's zoom out. Let's put all of this together, because I think the Cambodia-Thailand situation is actually a microcosm, a test case, and for something much larger. It's a stress test for Trump's foreign policy doctrine. Trump has called his approach peace through strength. The idea is that American power in economic, military, diplomatic is so formidable that adversaries and disputants will come to the table rather than risk confrontation with the United States. In some places, that doctrine has shown results. In some negotiations, the credible threat of American power has moved parties toward resolution. But Cambodia, Thailand reveals the limits of that doctrine in a crucial way. Strength can broker a deal. Strength cannot enforce a deal if the will to enforce it isn't there. Here's what America's strategic interests actually are in this region. First, contain Chinese naval expansion. The United States does not want China to develop an uncontested military presence in the Gulf of Thailand, the South China Sea, or the maritime choke points that connect the Indian Ocean to the Pacific. Ream Naval Base is directly relevant to this concern. Second, maintain freedom of navigation. The South China Sea carries an estimated $3 to $5 trillion in trade every year. American economic and security interests depend on those lanes remaining open and uncontested. Third, maintain credible alliance relationships. The United States has treaty allies in Southeast Asia, including Thailand. If Washington is seen as publicly shaming Thailand over the Cambodia border, that has diplomatic costs. But if Washington is seen as ignoring Cambodia's concerns, that signals that small nations can't rely on American commitments. This is the bind. Both Thailand and Cambodia matter. Their interests are currently in conflict, and the United States, which helped broker the ceasefire that appears to be unraveling, now has to figure out how to hold that agreement together without damaging either relationship beyond repair. And here's the bottom line that I want you to take away from this video. The Board of Peace is not magic. Brokering a ceasefire does not mean the conflict is over. It means the conflict has been paused. Pauses without enforcement mechanisms, without monitoring, without consequences for violations are not durable peace. They are time purchases. Cambodia knows this. That's why Manet came to Washington. That's why he spoke to Fox News. He is trying to generate enough political and media pressure to force the United States to act as a real enforcer, not just a headline grabber. Whether Trump's team will do that, whether they have the strategic patience and the political will to stay engaged in a conflict that most Americans have never heard of, in a region that feels very far away, that is genuinely uncertain. But here's why you should care. The way the United States handles Cambodia, Thailand will be watched by every small nation in the world that is currently trying to decide whether American commitments are worth anything. Whether cutting a deal with Washington means something, whether peace brokered with American involvement actually leads to peace. Taiwan is watching, Ukraine is watching, the Baltic states are watching, the Philippines is watching. The credibility of American power is not an abstraction. It is built or destroyed one decision at a time, one follow-through at a time, one enforced commitment at a time. Cambodia may seem small, but the lesson it teaches about American reliability will echo across every corner of the globe. That's the story behind the story. 80,000 Cambodians can't go home. A UNESCO World Heritage Site has been shelled. A ceasefire is fraying. A West Point-educated prime minister is betting his country's future on American diplomatic leverage. And in the background, China is watching, waiting, and quietly consolidating its position. This is geopolitics, not the sanitized version you see in 5-minute news segments. The real version, messy, high stakes, and deeply consequential. At Senate Decoded, this is what we do. We take the stories that slip through the cracks of the 24-hour news cycle and we decode them. We give you the history, the context, the strategic analysis, and the honest assessment of what it all means. If this video gave you something you didn't have before, a framework, a context, a sharper picture of the world, then do me a favor. Hit the like button. Share this with someone who needs to understand what's actually happening in Southeast Asia. Subscribe to Senate Decoded because this is not the last time we'll be covering this story. And stay sharp because the world is moving fast and the details matter. This has been Senate Decoded. I'll see you in the next one. Welcome to Senate Decoded. I'm going to give you the full picture, the history, the players, the geopolitics, the China angle, and exactly what's at stake for America. Buckle up. This one matters. Let's start with what's actually happening on the ground right now.